me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. Look at the time, 5 o'clock on a Friday. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And I'm thrilled to have with me today Natalie Spehar. Natalie, how are things?
Hey, going great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Oh, I'm delighted to have you on. I'm very curious to pick your brain a bit. But let's start with what's your kind of musical journey in a nutshell?
I am formally classically trained, and I started piano when I was 4 and some like Eurythmics classes, but the high school orchestra came to play for the elementary school around, I think, when I was in 4th grade, when music programs usually kick off, and I became instantly obsessed with cello. So at age 10, I started cello. I really could not put it down. I tried to apply everything I knew about music to cello, including, as we'll get into, a lot of things that are non-classical. And I've been obsessed with it ever since, honestly. But I ended up doing 2 performance degrees. I went to Eastman School of Music, and then I went to University of Maryland, College Park. At the same time, I grew up surrounded by a lot of eclectic musicians. My dad played accordion and played in a lot of polka bands. My mom was a backup singer for like a children's music touring guy. And then my uncle, who actually played with Harry Chapin a bit at one point, had his own recording studio and was a singer-songwriter. And that was the place that I hung out on the weekends. And so I watched like so much prog rock and all kinds of things, commercials like voiceover being recorded. And so I've also always been deeply interested in the whole like session musician studio process. Yeah, and then post-college, just keep freelancing, being entrepreneurial. I mean, I know we'll get into some specifics, but through touring with some of my own groups and doing a lot of session work led me to eventually like arena tours and theater tours, which I've done a lot of since 2013, especially. And most recently, you can hear me on the Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse official soundtrack. You can see, I just finished my 7th week of subbing with the Hadestown National Broadway tour. And I'm doing another production in the meantime on my break. But yeah, just keeping it moving.
Wow. Checking out your website and everything that you do, and thinking, does she also have 24 hours in her day?
Not always.
Very
The
impressive.
nights are busy, but yeah, daytime pretty relaxed usually.
Excellent, excellent. All right. Well, so I do have a lot of specific questions I want to ask you,
Yeah.
but this pervasive question with cellists that one encounters, that they love the instrument, they love music, but feel that they ought to practice more, but they don't. I mean, for me, I checked out a number of your YouTube videos, and I mean, you show a very genuine, natural enthusiasm, which of course can be quite contagious. But for people who need a little bit of extra help figuring out how to get that cello out and practice it more often, what are some of your go-tos for that?
I do think number one, do actually pull it out, because if you're walking by it, you tend to pick it up. And for me, if on the days when I'm just really not feeling it, if I force myself to pick it up for 5 minutes, it usually turns into 25 minutes more, so I love cello, right? We all gravitated toward it for some reason. So usually when it's in your hands and you just get started, it kind of takes off from there. But I also think I'm very interested in how things work, and that can be anything. I'm the kind of person that watches the like behind the scenes, how it works, how you make leather boots on TV kind of show. So my brain is always like, when I hear something new, even if it has nothing to do with my genre or instrument, I'm like, oh, how's that happening? So cello being my natural voice is the easiest thing to pick up and to figure out. but I think there's an element of just being really interested in being like in the zone, like in that really active listening zone that gives me like the high of practicing, you know. That's like the most fun part to me, is being so hyper present. So I just try to do things, whether it's watching some of my favorite performers play on YouTube, anything that'll get my brain into that like itchy, like hypersensitive listening zone. And then usually I can kind of, you know, start sawing away at something new I want to figure out.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Yeah, I think we probably all know some people for whom, when something new or a challenge or even a curveball, something unexpected comes along, it can be a little bit of a, you know, give them trepidation or cause for pause or something, but you seem to just embrace it.
Well, you do have to enjoy being uncomfortable, and that is a learned skill. But
Nice.
you know, now that you're saying that, that's such a good point. I've had a couple of teachers, and one in particular, that every time I would kind of plateau, she would be like, "That's awesome. That means that you're listening better now. That means, you know, like if you're frustrated, it's not that I'm not getting better. It's that I up leveled and now I expect more of myself." So looking at those like hit a wall moments is like, all right, well, I guess I'm getting a little better. This is no longer my standard, you know, and trying to sort of motivate myself with that thinking too.
Excellent. Does that relate, do you think, to, I mean, I don't know, do you differentiate between mental practice and the kind of the technical physical practice along those lines?
I do, well, I do both thoughtfully, I would say. I feel like I can get a lot out of mental practice or just actively listening, or some people, especially if you're like audition training, do a lot of visualizing the complete audition, you know, like sitting with your eyes closed and feeling yourself do it and hearing every note. So I think that is very important and separate from the kind of strategy I have when I'm, usually I do chunk, I have a goal in mind when I sit down to practice. I can just love free playing, but usually I'm working with like, okay, I have an hour. What am I doing right now? And it is more analytical in that way. So I do get different things from mental practicing and from, you know, just doing my checklist when I have time to sit down, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a different brain process for each of those.
All right. Well, maybe let me go from there to, with all of the styles you play in. I mean, for example, you're a very big proponent of new music, and a lot of those are kind of each in their own style. And then the list of kind of pop and rock performers you played with is very impressive. And then you have videos also of, you know, playing a Vivaldi concerto or a Bach suite or something, and you're able to keep those separate. So for example, you have a teaching video on vibrato, but when you go from style to style, you have to know when the vibrato is appropriate, and if it is, which kind. So is there anything that you have to do proactively to keep those styles separate in your mind, or is it just entirely reacting by ear?
I think in the biggest nutshell would be, it is hyper present listening. I think that, so there are, and I'm gonna try to say it in a nice way that I hope everyone can relate to. So there's a lot of string players that do pop covers, right? But there are a lot of people doing that don't sound like rock musicians to me, or the same as some people that maybe grew up playing in a rock band. So I think I'm very sensitive to, for like lack of a better word, like the accent that each genre has. And I do try to push students, especially like in an improvisation class, will listen to a lick played on guitar, and then we'll be like, all right, play it on cello. And it'll be, you know, maybe they play the exact notes, but I'm like, you didn't play what you just heard though. What's different about what you did and what about, and so then it gets you to be like, well, how'd they start the note? Okay, was there vibrato? Did it like develop, you know, so you get really sensitive to all of the little like micro expressive moments of what sounds different in each of those genres, and you start to see patterns of what's like cool in each genre, what's used a lot. And so it is, you are just kind of like learning to speak with different accents really well, basically.
Right. That's a great metaphor. And I think along those lines, it brings to mind, I thought it was very clever, your YouTube videos where you take requests and you just go from one thing to another on a dime. I think that's very clever. I'm going to try something like that. And then, well, and maybe along similar lines, you do arranging and composing. Does your arranging and composing kind of come to mind, or I don't know how to quite ask it. Is it that the playing in the different styles inspires the idea of different things that you want to compose, or do you find yourself being inspired to blend various things? Okay, I like this and I like that, but nobody's ever quite hybridized them before.
A little bit of both. I will say my students have driven a lot of my arranging projects, even personal ones, because there's this whole idea that I think was really drilled into me at Eastman about musicians, you know, and you look at a lot of like old Heifetz videos or something, and it was very normal for classical musicians at one point to also know how to improvise, to know how to teach really well, to know how to arrange things, to like that's a whole skill set that I think is successful professional musicians. So I try to force students to also dabble in all of that. And so often I end up working on the things that my students really want to hear. For instance, how many times have you gotten asked about the Paint It Black cello solo after it was in the after Wednesday Addams played it on TV, you know? So it's like stuff like that, that's hyper relevant. And like, yeah, I do want to figure that out. That's pretty cool. So then it, you know, leads down a rabbit hole. So and then it leads to like, actually some of that stuff's really hard and Apocalyptica is really awesome. So now I'm going to make an easy version of it and put that on Sheet Music Plus because I want people to be able to play it without having to do this, you know? So it just is like based on need and interest of what's happening around me usually. And then my original songs have just kind of, sometimes I just have the itch to figure something out, or I hear a particular like progression that I think is cool. I listen to a lot of sort of like Nickel Creek and Punch Brothers stuff on the side, like just, and some of the meter changes and progressions in the more like poppy bluegrass that are happening are like, you know, just so unusual to someone who's heard mostly like more straightforward rock and classical. So if I hear something that's like really ear bending, that would lead me to sit down too.
Nice. So then these probably eventually segued to the Alt C program you created. We would talk a bit about that.
Yeah, I have a whole like improv 101 and 201 series, and the 101 is available as a set of like 4 weeks of videos plus some bonuses online. I found that that's one of the things, I mean, string players are so nervous about improvising when they're brought up in a classical tradition. And why wouldn't you be? Because we play our, you know, our C major scale starts on C and walks right up. Like everything is very buttoned up, and all those patterns make perfect sense for classical music because those are the kind of things you have to read quickly and like internalize quickly, but they don't make sense for other genres. So then you throw a classical player into a totally different scenario and they don't know like where their place is in that set of instruments. There's kind of like, I didn't see any step-by-step helpful way to ease someone in without like throwing them in the deep end of the pool. So I tried to create that myself and tried to pick apart, again, because I'm always thinking about like deconstructing or how things work. It's like, what is improvising? Like, how do we get from here to here without just like throwing you over there and like, all right, have fun, improvise, you know? So there has to just be a way to make it make sense and make it less scary for classical musicians. So that's what I tried to do, is do baby step from, here's what you already know. You actually can do this. You just have to rearrange things a little bit.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, from the standpoint of just this, juggling of all of the performing that you do and the teaching and session playing, etc., I think I'd like to direct my students and any people watching to check out your websites. You have one website that makes sense about you, and here's reviews, here's you playing, etc., some blog stuff, but then also a website for Alt C and a website for NV strings. And so do you have a marketing background, or did you just kind of evolve a way to kind of present these things online that made sense to you and that works well?
I think that I am naturally a little bit entrepreneurial, which we'll get to in a sec, but I think I was very heavily inspired. When I did undergrad, I did my cello performance degree, but they also had an arts leadership certificate program that I did. And a lot of the speakers in that were not even necessarily musicians, but were like the guy who like wrote Good to Great, like business books, and marketing people and people that have had an idea and then patented it. And then, so I was like, wow, like I need to learn this. They made us write grants in those classes to just like be able to navigate funding and speaking, even elevator pitching yourself, because that also is not necessarily something you normally get in music school. So I have a deep appreciation for like the full entrepreneurial skill set. I think also I had a huge fear, as I think most freelancers do, of like not being needed at any particular time. So, it's scary when you don't have something on the calendar. So I think I was like, all right, well, then I will prevent that from happening by creating my own things to do. So I think at this point, and the more that they evolve and each has enough to fill its own website, that makes sense to separate it out. But I can't stress enough how important it is to just like be comfortable with, like I said, like grant writing, like formal communication and business proposal kind of things. And a lot of the projects that I started just for myself, I had like a metal cello quartet that I played in, another trio that ended up like getting featured on NPR and doing a European tour, literally anything can lead anywhere. just keep putting energy into stuff. Don't sit around and wait to be called,
That's a good takeaway. All right. And just along those lines, I'm thinking also about, as a studio player, you must be a very good sight reader. But then with the things like, taking requests, those videos of that, and a lot of the other stuff you do, you must also be strong on the play by ear end of things. So with your students, do you have, because sometimes we run across students who are one or the other. In your approach to teaching, do you have a go-to to help both types of people increase those skills?
Yeah, and they're both very practicable. So don't fall into like, I just wasn't born, I don't have a good ear. Not true. You just practice it, So I think it is for ear training. I start by having students play harmonically and melodically all different interval combinations and get used to saying that's a third, that's a minor third, that's a, I think it's all about intervals when it's about mimicking and playing by ear. And I also love practicing the way that jazz musicians play scales. You know, they'll play an arpeggio, but it's like a dominant seventh arpeggio, and then they go through every oh my gosh, why can't I think of the word? Every
permutation.
Yeah, every inversion. Sorry. Yeah. Every inversion of the chord. It's just about expanding what you can, what sounds familiar to you, right? Or playing a minor pentatonic scale, which you definitely also hear in classical music, but you're not like sitting and practicing 4 octaves of that in your practice room. So I think the ear stuff is actually quite easy to next level if you just start deviating from what is already familiar to you. It's really just about recognizing intervals quickly. I think is a good way to kick that into the next gear. And when you hear, you know, put on a track that you like, or if you have a little melody stuck in your head, go figure it out on your cello, and then go play it in every key on your cello. So it's just forcing yourself to get comfy with repeating things, and you start to get your own ideas, you know. And if you listen to, I'm on a little tangent here, but I've learned a lot from how jazz musicians practice. At Eastman, there's like a pretty even split. So I'd be in the practice room, but I'd be hearing like a saxophonist practice entirely differently strategically from me. And I was like, oh, that is smart. You know, like I'm like, wow, they like transcribed this person's solo, but then they're playing it in every key. And then it just like the volume of what they're making sound familiar, and also the volume of possibilities they're giving their ears. Then you go into an improv situation and suddenly you have so many ideas of what to pull from and make something new out of all of that influence. So smart. And we said ear training and sight reading. I have some like eye exercises I do, which sounds silly. I did a whole sight reading course at a summer camp last summer, where it literally like we were working on rapid eye movement. So I think that it's by like setting like putting a metronome on and starting slow if you need to, but picking like 4 corners of something and making my eyes jump quicker, and just like and then increasing the tempo. So like partly just physically, also like focusing back here, focusing here, like giving my eyes a little workout and like waking them up. And then there are, you know, that probably 500 sight reading exercises book. I can't remember the writer of it, but there are books, or use any music you have. What's nice about the sight reading exercises book is you can they're one-liner things that are not very memorable, so you can go through it. There's plenty to work with. It gets increasingly difficult, and you're just reading one line at a time, but you're, you know, open it up. Okay, I'm going to make sure I know what key I'm in, look for anything that looks tricky, and just go. And that kind of practice, desensitizing yourself to that, is so important. Or if that sounds boring to you, and you, on the flip side, like have a symphony or something that you can get a hold of, you know, the part on IMSLP, like cello part, sit down and just like play along with the recording and see what you get. Like, but it is just a matter of putting time in, I think, for both of those things.
Jumping back briefly to the play by ear, you emphasize the intervals, but would you also say that there's a degree to which a certain not being caught off guard by what sound is going to come out from a particular place on the cello? You know what I mean? That you have to have a certain fixed pitch expectation before the fact, you know, before you hear that sound and go, oh, I didn't know what sound I was going to get there. You know, before the fact, what sound you're going to get from a particular location on the cello.
Yeah. And so to go further from, I would stand by, you know, that mental, the being able to hear it before you play it still is also heavily dependent on knowing how to jump intervals quickly and what that sounds like. there's another really important part that I touch on a lot in my online classes, and I'll just call it like tension and release, but it's getting, appreciating like why certain degrees of the scale sound the way they do in whatever disharmony or harmony, they cause. And that's why we use set groups of notes, because it's very satisfying to like have the tension of it and then the resolve of it. So doing also exercises that really emphasize that and sort of desensitize, like basically okay, I'm here, where do I go now, in a way that feels good to a human ear, so just getting comfy with like there being no mistakes. Really, there might be something that you didn't intend to happen, and you can surprise yourself sometimes, but then okay, like now what do I do? Well, let me fix it, or let me do something that kind of wraps that up. But yeah, becoming a little more flexible and a little more creative in how you handle when things happen that you don't necessarily expect to happen to you.
All right. And then if you would also talk a little bit about standing and playing. I mean, I think for a number of people, if they're going to stand and play, they're going to try out the block strap, which is great for a lot of students, but you also just put the end pin out further and just play standing like a bassist would. Was there anything either that you had to do to get to the comfort level you have standing and playing, or just words of advice for students who might like that level of versatility too?
Oh, definitely. And there are some things that make it easier. Like you said, the block strap, like ergonomically, is very satisfying. I mean, I've used that for productions where I was also dancing and like back bending, and it felt good. I mean, and I was using a Lewis and Clark carbon fiber in case I, fell over or something. I did test the limits of that in a couple of places and was really excited about it. As for standing and playing generally, I have my couple of spots on my body where it feels most stable, because there is going to be more instability, especially if your end pin is a little wobbly. You just have to be at peace with the fact that, I'm like, okay, I have to learn how to sound good if my cello is moving more than usual. So there's that, just practice it, right? But also, I know that I'm always gonna, when I feel goofy, I'm gonna try to have like the side of my left knee brace it a little bit, and then I'm gonna figure out how to look most natural from there. So I have my little go-to like pressure points that hold it and make it a little more stable for me. That being said, with something like the Yamaha or the electric that has like no body to it, it's a little more of just playing on it for longer and actually knowing how to balance it. There's a little bit of this motion involved, if that makes sense, because as it wants to fall a certain way, you have to just lean into that and catch it. And it does get easier over time. And some people, I don't know if you watched Mariko, incredible Tina Guo, some people that play on a Yamaha a lot. Cello bat Sarah Chafee has also amazing string arrangements. She's a cellist in Vegas. But everyone's got the same kind of little dance going, where you can tell like when the awkwardness of some of those instruments want to fall, you just have to catch it and keep going. So it gets easier over time. And the other thing I would say is, if you are in a situation where you want to go from sitting to standing, you should sit on a higher stool and get comfortable with that, so that you don't have to change end pin length. And that took more getting used to for me, because I love feeling more grounded on like a lower cello chair. But now I have come to embrace just, like bar stool height, sitting up higher, so that I can just literally tip up, stand up, and the cello is already an okay height to work with.
Nice.
So see, it's about kind of, problem solving, getting yourself into the position too.
Yeah. Well, and there's certainly a degree to which the flexibility that like what you say, catching the cello as it wants to fall and being able to think about one's entire body, including the back, like a standing violinist or violist always gets to do, can be a real good thing too.
Oh yeah, and it certainly, yeah, you have to build good habits or you will get really sore. And I have to make sure I'm not actually trying to like hold the cello up with my left hand, in addition to, so just also trying to like stay as relaxed as usual, even with the possibility that there'll be a wiggle here or there. So try not to like death grip anything while you're doing it, because that'll just lead to, soreness later.
Excellent, excellent. Well said. All right.
Oh, and let me show off, I'm an official NS artist now. So if you are wanting to get into rock cello, NS is by far the coolest harness. It was designed by professional guitar and bass players. So I'm currently using this custom made cello, and as you see, no body, but also kind of like a block strap, sits really nicely on me angle wise, and you can turn this way, tilt it however you want. So there are people coming out with like incredible solutions for cellists that really want to get up and move around.
That's terrific. All right, projects coming up, performances, other irons you have in the fire.
So currently working on a production of Austen's Pride, which is a really cool rewrite of Pride and Prejudice that includes Jane Austen as a character. So that's what I'm doing this week and next week. And then I go back on tour a little bit out west with Little River Band, who I play with a lot, some yacht rock. So very fun. And then in the fall, I'm talking with the Hadestown people. I'll learn more about that. But most pressing, what's today? Tomorrow, if any of your students happen to follow Lauren Spencer Smith, who's like a big TikTok singer, I played a good bit on her new album that's getting released tomorrow. So I'm very excited to hear that. She is phenomenal. Yeah, got a lot of irons in the fire as usual, but it's all good stuff.
Yeah, we're lucky to play such a beautiful instrument, aren't we?
Yeah, and it really does transition genre to genre so well, and everyone's always happy to have it around. So yeah, we made a good choice.
Tremendous. That is a whole lot of inspiration for a weekend and then the week thereafter of practicing. So thanks so much, Natalie. It's been a real pleasure talking with you.
Thank you. It's so nice to connect. And anyone who wants to reach out and say hi at any time, feel free.
Tremendous. All right. And the rest of you, will see you this time next Friday. Happy practicing.
You had me at